Hey everybody, welcome back to the next part of the unit tier list of the infantry in Wargame Red Dragon, potentially the last part, we will see. I hope you had a nice couple of days, whether you celebrated the holidays or not, and yeah, I don't think there's anything to catch up on from last time, so let's get into it, I'd say. Rannikkojääkäri. Well, for one, they're obviously completely overshadowed by the 90s parts, but even then, as special forces, you want them to be either as cheap as possible, like let's say base Legion, and then just murder infantry, or you want to be something like LSTR that can like also have like man pads or something, or have like utility bonuses. But if it's just an MG primary weapon and AT weapon, then you preferably want them to be, or a reasonable AT weapon for 30 points at least, you want them to be fairly self-sufficient. And with only 525 meter range on their AT weapon for 30 points, they're not that self-sufficient. They're decent against infantry, have a pretty good MG, have a normal assault rifle, but that range on the AT weapon makes them just quite awkward. They're not a waste of points, they're not horrible. They'll probably still sit here, partially because they get like the KT, but yeah, that's just nothing too fancy. Rannikkojääkäri. Jesus Christ, what is this name? Their 90s version. They're just solid, but for 35 points, having a RPK set clone, which is an okay MG, but not the RPK 70. Is it called RPK 74? It's an average MG. It's better than like a standard MG, like a PKM or M60, but like even for Red 4 standards, it's not that amazing. Just a normal assault rifle, although they get increased CQC capabilities. Apples is fine, but for 35 points, they're fine, but like 35 points for an Apples, which is good, but like still only 700 meter range, quote unquote, only 23 AP, and not amazing against infantry and only 10 HP. I really, unless you have no other choice, really, like let's say in Red 4 Marines, I wouldn't really suggest using them. Maybe if you're playing like Moto and you just want some fast infantry, elite infantry to sneak around, but in that case you would just use air decoys anyway. So I'm not a particular fan of them. They're fine, but like they don't do anything particularly important in Baltic or Finland. Raskassinkoryhmä. I don't know whatever the name's supposed to be. Recoilless rifle squad, 16 AP, 1400 meter range, very similar to the Tanke Shashou. The primary weapon is a bit worse, probably. I think those might be like, those could potentially be reservist squad stats. They're a bit weird. They have higher accuracy than battle rifle on 9 infantry, but even worse rate of fire, so it's a bit weird. Hold up, what did I give other? What did I give the M67 Han? I gave them 8 here even. And the Tanke Shashou, I haven't, or we aren't even there yet. They have of course some nice transports. They have the KT, the Musti, the KRKK, all those XAs. They also have BMP1 or BMP2, which can be a nice combination. Yeah, I mean, they're decent. Again, in an unspec deck, probably not seen that much. Then again, like I've said previously, the 5th card in Baltic Front is fairly flexible. You see them though fairly frequently in Baltic mech decks or... Oh, I forgot to add the 90s here. Or motor decks. I think I also used them in my Red 4 Marines. But yeah, they're very solid. The BMP2 is nice and all. It's not a Hachiki, but it's still decent. BMP1 can be nice because it's cheap, and of course some nice wheel options. Yeah, I mean, they're just fine. RBS 70, and just some normal man pads. What did I give the previous RBS? The Swedish one. I gave Beat here. But they also have the STRF 940, these don't. RBS 70, they're still decent. but they're among the worst, not the worst, but the worst man pets. So I think I will only put them into the C tier. Unless I've been inconsistent and put an RBS 70 into the B tier, and that also only has pretty mediocre transports. RBS 70 Mark II. I mean, it's the same but with a bit more range, but you also pay more. Once again, no particularly great transports. The range is certainly nice though. The extra range. It's a rough one. It's a rough one. I think they're still only C tier. Though maybe I'm underestimating them. Maybe they are B tier. Same with the other ones. I think, you know, thinking about it, I think they're still both B tier. Just because our man pets are just so useful. And I think sometimes one underestimates the range. You know, they have so much more range compared to stingers. Those especially. So I think it's, yeah, RB. I mean, that's literally the same name as the. Oh no, hold up. They have a hyphen. What did I do? They have a hyphen, of course. Or is this the screen region? Screen region is fine. They have a hyphen, so that's not the exact same name. Yeah, Redeye. Oh yeah. And then they also don't have particularly amazing transports, but it's more or less irrelevant. Redeye, obviously. Down here, Reserverschützen. I really am not a huge fan of them. They're 15 men for 5 points, but they only come in 10-point transports. That is like, it's just a normal wheel transport. I think I've mentioned that before. Did we have a 15-man reserve squad already? The Yubei we didn't, because they started with a Y. There are the North Korean ones. Yukwi we did have. They're basically. Where did I put Yukwi? C tier? No, D tier. I did put them in D tier. Wow. I mean, yeah, I personally never use them. I know Putin likes them, but I think I'm too far here. So I guess I'll put them in D tier as well. Makes sense. I know. I think. General Boulanger was also mentioning them, but I just for 15 points, something, just one squad in a transport that also gets one shot. I don't think it's worth it. I accidentally did it. There we go. Reservistes, basically the same as Natres, the Dutch ones, same transports. They have that horrible LRAC 74, but it is more or less irrelevant. So, yeah. Riflemen. Now this is spicy. I guess it's not really spicy. It's very easy, actually. I have Grenadiers in S, so I probably should put Riflemen in there as well. But I'll still just quickly go over them again. Of course, the main purpose these days is just spam them in the M103A3. 3 front, 3 side, Browning, amazing. The squad itself is fine. Assault rifle, standard MG, M72 long. And not really much more you can ask for. The Bradley line is fine. M2A1 and M2A2 are both very serviceable. Base M2 not so much. For 50 points it'd probably be pretty good. Not amazing, but good. But for 20 points, the Bushmaster is just not particularly amazing. So coupled with a tower that is not very amazing, I try to meme around with them a bit, I think, every now and then, but the M2A1 as well as the M2A2 are very serviceable. And those are your 3 main transports, really, and they do fine in all of them. Of course, in the Bradleys, they're mostly just ways to get the Bradleys, but yeah. And of course, then with their amazing fire support consisting of Abrams, CS, and that's mostly it, I suppose. Or I guess the M103 itself, you will just fill force with that. Yeah. It's just what the meta currently is, or has been for quite a while. Rifleman 90. I think there were still 8 here, honestly. Call me a bit crazy, but they're still very useful. The 84 is nice. This is of course not an M80 law. Is it called M80 law? The law 80, that's what I mean, law 80. But you get a great 5-point transport. You still get a nice Bradleys. The Fusilier 90s also get like a very weird, I think pretty bad MG. So I don't know. I don't fully remember how that MG compares. It's CQC, but it's honestly more or less irrelevant. Again, still the really good Bradley lines. Maybe I'm overestimating them a bit with the 8 here. Let's see what else we have in the 8 in terms of line infantry. With Gewehrman 90, with Bojong-Su. We have the light riflemen. Or light riflemen, yeah. Or the Strelcy. I'm telling you, I think there's still 8 here. Who knows? Maybe, again, just like with everything, maybe I'll change my mind when I do like one final check through all the tiers. But yeah, RIMa base. I mean, they're more or less very similar to the base Legion. They're a bit slower, of course, 5 kmh, but other than that, same weaponry, I believe. They have the Panther, but it isn't really a saving grace, honestly. They're still okay, but it's just nothing special about them. And at that price range, hold up, is it an I? Is that how they're actually written? That better not be a lowercase L. Or did it just forget to capitalize the A? Honestly, I never paid attention to this. I hate it now. RIMa 85, they're very, very solid. The only reason why you see them fairly infrequently is because Legion 90 exists. Other than that, they have a Minimi, they have an Apelas, they get a VAB T20, you can also get them in a Panther. Really, that's great. Some people, of course, still use them. They're not like nobody uses them, but just not particularly often in Eurocore. But they're certainly very, very solid, to say the least. Very self-sufficient. Just very similar to Panzerjäkäri. They have slightly worse transports. I mean, they don't have a KT, is really the main thing, but they have a better MG. Yeah. But they just fill the same role as Legion 90. And then usually, most people don't really get a second squad of infantry that does more or less the same thing. So the most frequent time you see them being used, they're used in a Panther, just to have the versatility and have that unit that comes with the Panther, so you have access to Panthers. So yeah. Rovait are great. You get a Zelda, you get a Merkava 2A. That's really all there is to it. There's slightly... I actually don't... I think they're a bit worse than Riflemen. They have a Fallow, but they also have a Bell Rifle. I think the MG is worse, but the primary weapon is better. Yeah. I think there's still 8 here. I've come around a bit on the Zelda. Zelda's still amazing, don't get me wrong. But of course has a bit less armor than the M113A3 as well as the MX13. But really what bugs me the most is the off-road speed, which I really dislike. It's not as horrible as BTR 50, but it is still noticeable in my opinion. What does the M113A3 have? 65, yeah. So again, it's not a huge difference, but it can be a bit annoying at times, and that off-road speed is really quite useful. Then again, you also have access to Merkava 2A. And of course, the Zelda and Merkava 2A of course work even better with 10-man squads compared to 5-man squads. I think I'd be hypocritical if I didn't put them in the S tier in that case. The Zelda is, at worst, it's a bit worse than an M103. At best, it's a bit better. But I think most of the time it might just be a side grade, because I guess the speed of the off-road speed of your transport also kind of depends in some situations, not all situations, but in some situations, like for offensive usage, also kind of depends on the off-road speed of your vehicles. And Merkavas, for example, are also not particularly fast. So maybe when you're playing Israel, not mixed mech, but Israel, that is most likely, or almost certainly, not as much of an issue as it would otherwise be. And yeah. But, of course, well, let me scroll this up a bit. Of course, no, they're gonna be Purple. Why? Because Rovait 90 exists, which are, for all intents and purposes, the same but better. They have a better MG voice primary. They have but especially the law upgrade is so nice to have, because it allows Rovait 90 to one-shot 2 armor transports, and in general, if it comes down to it, you know, some side shot to tanks or even front shot to medium tanks actually also deal more damage. Of course, main thing is you one-shot 2 armor transports or vehicles, and that is very nice. For no price whatsoever. The price you pay is that you get less per card. On the Zelda, at least. I don't think it's the case for the Makaba. In Israel itself, it's not a huge deal because you get a bit of availability bonus. But yeah, everyone just uses Rovait 90, and for good reason. Royal Marines, they have a battle rifle. You don't want it on elite squads. You have one of the worst MGs. You don't want it in general. And you get a Carguzo Staff M2, which for 30 points is mediocre at best. So the squad itself is already pretty horrible for the 30 points. You get a Stormer, which is a good transport, but only one side armor. Don't underestimate having only one side armor. You get a Lynx 87, which is fine, but still, honestly, they're D tier. They're just not very good. They're not useful. They don't do anything special. And for 5 points more, you get a squad that is significantly better, and yet still nobody uses them, or very few people use them. They're in a similar situation as the base Rannikkojääkäri. But for 35 points, having only 22 AP is rough. Couple that with having only 10 HP, basic assault rifle, granted the best MG, but also outside of the age 7 average transports at best, except for the Stormer, I suppose, but you don't use Royal Marine Sign in the Stormer, or you don't want to use them in a track 5-pointer mostly for what they do. Sorry, but like, they're just not very good. They're for 35 points at 10 HP, just needing 3 shots to kill medium tanks. That's just too weak. Dealing virtually no damage or very little damage to super heavies up front, and even heavy tanks not that much. And like they'll do fine against infantry, but there are no like Terminators like Fallschirmjäger 90 or Corps 95. So I just, maybe it's like the hate, or not hate, but dislike of Commonwealth speaking in me, but I don't think that they're better than C. I just think they're usable, but you can't see it, but I'm just shaking my head. I'm just shaking my head. Oh, here the big boy. Sapery S tier for one single reason, and that reason is called BTRT. In theory, I suppose you could get them in the MTV if you want affordable MTVs, but you also get them with 10-point infantry. But it's just a BTRT. The BTRT only comes in Sapery and Sapery 85. And the BTRT is just redonkulous. It's just, without a doubt, one of the best transports in the game. If you want to hear us talk more about it, or Soviets in general, of course, don't be afraid to watch the 3-hour monstrosity of Putin and I going over USSR. But that thing, you just into forests, 1 or 2 of those, and any infantry can say goodbye. You can assault towns with them because they can tank a lot of shots. They're even sort of a threat, or at least they're at least annoying for enemy tanks because, again, they don't die as quickly, and the grenade launchers can do damage to them. They have medium optics, they have an MG on top of the grenade launcher. Of course, ideally you'd want infantry that has some anti-tank weapon, but the Sapery are just here to tank damage. But that package is just without a doubt S tier. Like, if you're not using this in your Soviet deck, you're doing something wrong. Of course, they're gonna be red, like huge, very deep red. Of course, it's the same shade as every other squad, but yeah. Sapery 85, same. You always want to use Sapery base because you only get the infantry, or you only want the infantry to just tank damage, and in that case, the only thing that matters is HP. However, even if Sapery base didn't exist, Sapery 85 and a BTRT would still be a ridiculous combination. It is of course worse in nearly all scenarios, but the BTRTs would still just be too pog. The Saperzy, same situation as like all the other flamer squads. You get that crack, which is just horrible. 1 armor, horrible autocannon for 15 points. No, thank you. Saperzy Szturmowi, I don't know. I have no clue. They're a big question mark to me. But I think just purely due to flamer squads in general just being so niche and in most scenarios not very useful, I think they're probably still D tier. There's a good chance, again, I don't even know for sure, but there's a good chance that they're just gonna murder infantry like nothing else because they're shock. So their assault rifle's actually a decent damage dealer as well. But they, of course, without the transports also cost more. But just given the role and the fact that they're still not gonna delete infantry as fast as like Legion 90 or Spetsnaz even, they're gonna be a lot more easy to deal with compared to those. They're probably just pure town fighters and that's it, but I'd still just go for the Spadochroniarze. Instead, the Polish shock squads. Sapeurs, you can get them in a Panther. So that is something to consider. And that alone makes them B tier. I hate to say it. And it's not the best way to get a Panther, because they're 15 points, but it's still a decent way. Yeah. Probably, I guess, in that case, the purple, because still nobody uses them. Did I just do purple? What just happened? What just happened? Okay, it's fixed. It's fixed. It's fixed. I fixed it. Thank goodness. Okay. SIS, they're a weird bunch. SIS themselves are okay or fine. They're not amazing. That not LSCR tier. They have just a normal assault rifle. They have an okay AT weapon and they have an A stinger. Some people would say the A stinger is better than the Igla. I could see it in certain scenarios or certain decks where the 5 HP is certainly more useful, especially against planes, if you're double tapping planes with 5 HE missiles. But for me, they're mostly used against helos anyway. Plus, especially on red 4 side with the LSTR, that 4 HE is usually not that big of a deal because against planes, you have 7 HE OSAs and 9 HE books and whatnot. And of course, the Vampire is just miles ahead of the 84. The biggest issue that SAS have, though, is just they have no ground transports. They only can come in a Puma and 2 Lynxes. If you see them use, they're only Lynx age 7, and then it's a 65-point package. And that infantry, as nice as it is just the epitome of Jack of all trades, master of none. It loses to most infantry squads, is inconsistent and not particularly strong against vehicles, and the Stinger with a lack of range. The Stinger is probably the best out of those 3 weapons. But still for 65 points, you know, if you get like a 65-point squad in a Panther or Lynx Age 7, you look at Commandos Para, the French Special Forces, 15 HP, and you drop them in a town at the front line, and the enemy is gonna have unless it's like the enemy is actually pushing for the town with a lot of forces, it's gonna be pretty awkward at times, especially like, let's say, the flank town on held in a very small place between the 2 spawns. That can be awkward to deal with, you know. But SAS, they're not really that awkward to deal with. The only time they're awkward to deal with is when they're behind your lines and you don't know where they're sneaking you know. But for that, they're just too expensive. If they came in ground transports, you can use them as more or less reliable, or like the bolstering of your AA net and stuff that, you know, can be at the front line. And then they're affordable for 45 points. But for 65 points, and you lose out on the availability, not particularly good. And there's also no real use in bringing them in a Puma or Lynx H1, because then you also have to take into account it's a whole infantry card that doesn't really do an important role. LSTR, for example, they bolster your AA net much more than SAS do, trust me. But they're also like incredibly strong anti-tank weaponry for your front line, and they're a good bit better against infantry. You get more per card, and you can get them in a ground transport, which makes said bolstering of your AA net much more easy. Much easier, I should say. And as such, SAS are just kind of a niche unit. I think this is one of the more controversial takes, but genuinely, I think they're C tier. I should also say SAS is one way to make Commonwealth, like with one change of units, really, one significant change, the SAS could make Commonwealth a lot better, and that is put them into Recon tab and give them ground transports. They would still be worse than air request, but they would significantly help Commonwealth. That's all there is. SAS are, they have an SMG, they have a Carl Gustav M3, and they have an okay wheel transport. I mean, I think the big deal here is just that for one, they have a lot more range than most other special forces. That 875 meter range is really not that common. SMG is really nice on elite squads. They're fine. They're actually pretty good. In fact, I'd probably use them over SAS these days. They're solid. They're self-sufficient. They have range. They're fast. They have decent transports. The helicopter transport for the flanks is not amazing because it's so big and clunky and takes ages to land, and it's not very useful with the minigun because it shoots from the side. So every time the helicopter wants to shoot, it has to turn. Other than that, self-sufficient, good enough against infantry, vehicles. Not amazing, not great, not terrible. Shayetet, they're actually genuinely a good bit better. Why? Because they're 5 points cheaper and offer the same range with more accuracy and AT. While, of course, they have an AKM and not an SMG. They have literally the same as MG stat-wise. But for 5 points cheaper, despite coming in the Hammer, they're that B300 instead of the Carl Gustav M3 is just so nice to have. I think they might genuinely be A tier. Once again, that range, and for like 30 points, that range, that's actually really nice to have. They might be like on the verge between A and B. You know, they might be like on the bottom of A tier and the top of B tier. SMAW, definitely A tier as well. Why? They have the Humvee, so can get them cheap, but they're like shock squads. They're like compared to other. Okay, let me restart it. Compared to other fist squads, you know, they're faster. Their primary weapon is suddenly a lot more useful, and they're the only fist squads with a 15 RPM, 875 meter range outside of Stoottroepen 85. And they have one more AP. But they're just so strong in a defensive position or on a stack of 2. They're so rough to deal with, and they actually murder infantry quite quickly as well. They of course cost 10 points more or 5 points more compared to Stoottroepen, but it's certainly a price worth paying. Certainly genuinely one of the stronger units in Wargame, which is like because they're in fucking 8 here. Of course. Sochong-Su. So once again, we have an line infantry squad with an amazing 5-pointer. K200, it is faster than an M113. It has less armor, but it has an additional MG. That additional MG though can only fire while stationary, and I don't know if maybe it can't fire. I thought it might be one of those MGs that can only shoot at front from the front. That's really on the base soldiering foot. It's really the only noticeable transport. The only one worth talking about. That still kind of makes him S tier, believe it or not. Does it? The other thing to consider is, for one, it only has 2 front armor compared to most other ones, except for the Rovait in the S tier. But this is also the only good transport, right? All the other squads also have additional transports, making them a lot more flexible, like the Grenadiers with the autocannon transport, Riflemen with the Bradleys, Rovait with the Merkavas. And it's only 1 extra MG and not 2 extra MGs compared to the Zelda. But honestly, it's still a strong combination. Sochong-Su, and of course, because Sochong-Su 85 exists, they also get access to the KFE 25 and the KFE 4050, which these days virtually nobody uses because it's 15 points and it used to be 10 points. Yeah, but Sochong-Su 85, just like Rovait 90, with that A4 law giving them 16 AP, so much stronger. And the KAV 25 is also a very strong option. Also, I have to make them red, just like the Rovait 90. Spadochroniarze. They're literally Monschützen but wheeled. And with wheeled, I mean they get a 10-point wheel transport. You can also get them in the MS-17, but stat-wise, the infantry itself is just like Monschützen. I like to use them in my Baltic front decks every now and then, upvetted, just for pure town finding. Because then they're cheap, they're 25 points. They do their job. Yeah, that's just what they do. Other than that, in most decks, like in Baltic Front, you would just use for everything else in Baltic Front, you just use Panzerjäkäri or Jäkäri, depending on what you want to use them for, like force fighting or all-round infantry, or like aggressive infantry. Then you have the KT as well. And in Eastern Bloc, you have the Mordschützen in the 5-pointer, and so you have a much cheaper option. And the squad itself is, of course, basically just a carbon copy. So I think they're B tier. They're like, yeah, they're a good option. But yeah, Spadochroniarze 90. They almost just like Monschützen 90, except they don't get like the fancy East German prototype weapons, right? The SCGs and LMGs and whatnot. I get the exact same transports. They get better MG. Their MG is better than compared to the base RPK, so that's nice. I think just at 5-point increase. Plus, you have to get them in a wheel transport, so they're not that affordable anymore compared to, let's say, Monschützen base, which are 20 points, or these they're 25. But now you have to pay 30 points for a squad that is fine against infantry, but just not that great versus vehicles because it's so inconsistent. And I think that makes them only C tier. Spadochroniarze 90. Spetsnaz. They are like it's not really a thing these days anymore. But they were like the epitome of Eugen, this unit is OP, nerf. And admittedly, very early in Red Dragon, I was sort of one of those people. And I don't know if they were OP, but they used to have such a huge stun radius and stun damage or suppression damage on their RPO that if they shot at it in forests, besides just stunning virtually every vehicle instantly, they also always stunned themselves because the radius was just so huge. One of the weird things about them is just their fancy transports like BTR-80A and BTR-90 just don't really work or work as much with them. There's not a particularly good. They don't work very well in conjunction with those. They don't support each other very well. It's just weird. So you'd usually just see them in BTR-80s or maybe in like BTR-Ds if you want them very cheap, and that's it. Don't use them in transports. That just doesn't work. I guess Graduate can kind of work, but they're just very niche. If you like really need to have some infantry in your Soviet decks that can kill infantry in towns, then they'll do that. But that's about it. They're worse than Legion 90, but they're still gonna murder everything else, and just in terms of infantry. But just in forests these days, there's too many vehicles always there, so they'll not do much there. SPG 90s, I guess it's B tier just purely because of the MI-17. But the squad itself it's shock, but like you get only 7 RPM, you get only 10,000 meter, 1050 meter range, and only 16 AP. It's just so weird. Nobody uses it. But I mean, if you want a cheap MI-17, yeah, go ahead. If they were like 10, like if they were like shock squads with rifles for 20 points or something, maybe that'd be interesting. But the way they are now, they're just Hey, we have one of those again. Stinger. I mean, obviously 8 here. And then we have literally the same unit again. I'm just gonna write it twice here now. Just because I can. Stinger. But I mean, yeah, Stinger, always good, always nice. Hard to fit in, but still. Stoottroepen base. They're more or less very similar to base. What are they called? Commandos. They have some okay transports, but it doesn't really make them amazing. I mean, they have an all-right MG, they have a battle rifle, and some good transports. So honestly, I guess they're still B tier, right? Again, they're average I can't talk. The average shock squads, but they have a battle rifle, which is good. I think called commandos. Oh yeah, commandos. They have battle, but they have the Bren. Yeah. Now I remember. But they have at least it's Tzanhanim MG. But honestly, with the transports, I think without like the great 5-pointers as well as the autocan transports, that they might still be C tier if they just had average transports, right? They're not amazing, but like they're just like RIMa and Legion. Stoottroepen 95 though, they're straight up S tier, and I'll tell you why. For no extra points, you get the best MG in the game, and you get a very significant improvement to your AT weapon. And those two alone just suddenly make them just so good. And on top of that, and this was necessary, they still have the same amazing transports. They have an amazing 5-pointer. They have a good autocan transport, and they also have a 2 armor wheel transport with a Browning, although it only has 1 side armor and not the greatest autonomy. They're like Commandos 90, right? They're a bit worse in the anti-infantry department because they only have a normal primary weapon, but they have a better selection of transports, and they have a significantly better AT weapon. Just more RPM, more AP. You lose 10% accuracy, but they're just very good, and they're also like pretty nice to have against like the current meta of just 5-point spams, because they're 20 RPM and 19 AP is more than enough to one-shot them. What else do you want? Stormer are great. Ignore the transports, they're in a similar vein as Commandos 90 and Stoottroepen 95. They have the second best MG in the game. They have a battle rifle, which is neither of the other two have, but which is good. And they have a pretty good AT weapon that can deal with like cheap 5-pointers and all those, and all that stuff. Still somewhat of a threat to tanks, depending on what tank and depending on whether you shoot at the front and side and whatnot. And they have some good transports. They have good wheel transport if you want them for town fighting or just all round but fast, which I like to use them in. You have them in a good 10-point transport, cheap autocannon. You have an amazing CV90. Yeah, Stormer are just great. They're just like, they can do kind of everything. They're good against. They're useful for grinding, useful for town fighting, useful for all-round stuff. They have great transports. They have cheap transport. They have expensive transports. They have tanky transport, squishy transport, fast, slow, whatever you want. They're just, oh, I love them. They're one of my favorite infantry squads, honestly. And the CV90 is probably my favorite IFV. Also, without a doubt, one of the best. Whether it's the best is probably up to debate, but it's probably my favorite one. Stormingenior base, yeah, just like Deckungsgruppe, no, and here, compared to Deckungsgruppe, no particularly good transports to speak of, so they're basically just as good as, what, more? Yeah. Stormingenior. And we have those which are basically just like Eric's, but of course you get a CV90, and that makes them suddenly a very good unit. It's just that you still don't see them very often because Stormer 90 exists, Stormer exists, as well as Gewehrman 90, which is one of the two units you see the CV90 being used the most, or the only other two units that have access to it, rather. You can, I guess, also spam them in the NM. If the other two units didn't exist, or only the Stormingenior 90 had access to those transports, you would definitely see them a lot more often, just because of these transports, most notably the CV90. And the CV90 is just so good. And the Stormingenior are still not horrible, right? They have a use. But yeah, I think you get the point that I'm trying to get across. I have to let's expand this a bit. And make this a bit, whoopsie, this a bit, because yeah, we don't really have a lot of use for the E tier. Stormpionjärer. They're actually even worse than the others, but they have access to the SASR F9040. So just ignore what I said. They are better than the others because they have the SASR F9040. Every other transport is fine, but does that still make them B tier? Because compared to RBS 70, which the Swedish ones who also have access to this, they themselves just aren't that useful. So I guess C tier, right? I mean, as nice as the SASR F9040 is, it's not the type of transport where you really need a 10 HP tank in the form of infantry in front of it, like a BTRT or something else, because the SASR F9040 is more of an anti-vehicle IFV, but it's better against vehicles than it is against infantry compared to, let's say, the CV90. It's tough to say. I think what's also tough is that recording these over 5 weeks means that I am not 100% certain how I evaluate certain combinations in previous weeks. So I might be a bit inconsistent with this, but I think I'm just gonna put them in C tier. And yeah. I'm just looking. It's a horrible Strela, but you get weird transports. Not weird transports, but you get I guess if you want a cheap white Vitra, you could get this, but you might as well just get Mechanisovana. Where did I put the... I put the Czech Strela in here. I'm gonna put them in C tier. If you play mech, then they might be somewhat consistent, and then you might get them for some PvP action if you used all three of... I guess there's no use point in putting in purple. I think purple is only for B and up, or I should say blue/purple. So yeah, if you use all 3 cards of Mechanism 1 and Silver BVP is affordable or something, you could also have the 5 cards, but I guess, I don't know. Like, if, you know, other units of course didn't exist, then there might be an okay combination like mech. Strela 2, I don't think I need to talk about this. They also have horrible, like not horrible, but like no noteworthy transports. They're just Gono-Strikey base clones, and as such, they're not much better than them. They also have like basically the same transports. They have ground transports, which I think Gono-Strikey actually also have. But again, okay, this name. I'm sorry to say that I did not watch the guide that's the Polish unit pronunciation guide, but if I remember, I'll put it in the description. I saw that someone made it. Someone who was also asking about this actually in these very comments, but I didn't watch it. I'm sorry. I hope just I didn't butcher that name when writing it down there. Sturmpioniere. They're, you know, the type of squad that doesn't have a flamethrower, but like the burst fire, so that they actually do some damage, like the either Gongbyong or Gongbyung, the South Korean ones. But just like them, you know, no particularly amazing transports would make them any better. Syoujyu-Buntai, the squad itself is fine, it's good, I guess, you know, a bit above average. Law, basic MG, but battle rifle, which is nice. Their 2 transports are just, I mean, the 5-pointer is okay, but it has only 1 armor and not the best autonomy like all the Japanese vehicles and the Humvee. So I guess it's just D tier. Canadian rifles are also in D tier. Diggers are in D tier. I guess so. I don't know. I feel like D tier is maybe a bit too harsh on like the Canadian rifles as well. I'll put them in here for now because if I make up my mind about them, I want them all to be like in here as well at the same time. But maybe I think like just the basic 10-point infantry that isn't like horrible, as in like has SMGs and like the worst MG in the game or something. But if they're like 10 points like these and have like an acceptable 5-pointer, I think D tier is too harsh. I think C tier is. Fuck it, I'll do it right now. I'll do it right fucking now. No, I won't, because then people will be confused if they see the video where the Canadian rifles and then they open up the tier list and they don't see why. So I might as well just do it in a video where I go over them again. I just hope I don't forget about this. 90s version, they're very similar like Panzerskytte 90, right? Or Panzerskytte. You just get them for the Hachikyushiki. And Hachikyushiki is fine, it's good. 4 armor, medium optics, it's fast, good autocannon. The Tumat is not to be underestimated. And I also have the WAPC, although that combination is not seen that frequently, but it's still like a usable one. So I think just, you know, B tier. Although I did get the M67 Han A tier. Although I feel like that combination also kind of works a bit better. Maybe I should derank the M67 Han a bit. But once again, I think that's something that I'll go over when I, you know, or I'll you know, deal with once I go over the whole thing again. Territorials, and just your basic reservist squad, just like LHV and whatnot. 500 is not that great because it's slow and doesn't even have a 50 cal, but when it has only 1 armor, it doesn't really matter if it has a 50 cal. I think the speed though is kind of nice to have. They have a battle rifle, which is nice. M72 law, but like, yeah, the wheel transport, just don't bother with this. Like, you pay 5 points to have them faster, but it's just a squishy, the transport. So yeah, I guess just like LHV. TO, I mean, basically the same, right? They have a 50 cal, the transport is faster, but has worse autonomy, and they have fucking what are those? The Thompson, is that the Thompson? Might be the Thompson. SMG. But once again, it's not really, who cares what they have? Hold up, they're 15 men. But I guess I still put them in here. No, I don't, right? I have Reserverschützen in the D tier even? I do, yeah. I totally forgot they're 15 men. Tzanhanim. I think they're in the same vein as like base commandos and stuff. They have an SMG which isn't too nice. RPG 7V which is like not even in Carl-Gustaf M2 and for 20 points. And of course they only have like very basic transports and a BTR and a Bell. Tzanhanim 95, however, there's something else. 875 meter range, as I said, is so good. They have a carbine, means above average primary weapon, better than a assault rifle, right? Average MG and still the same transports, but carbine and B300 is easy B tier, very useful. I'd probably still just use Shayetet. Obviously they're also a tier higher, but they're still very good. That range is just so nice. Tanke Shashou, I mean, no noteworthy transports. They have a 5-pointer with 2 front and side, but that's about it. And 12 AP, 1400 meter range. You can ask for a lot more, but you don't get it. Tanke Shashou 85, however, they're actually pretty decent. Why? For one, they have 16 AP. You know, that's pretty good. Allows them to one-shot 2 armor transports. But they also have the WC551, and that's actually a decent combination, especially in openers or for flanks, where you don't expect like a lot of stuff happening. Put them in towns and they're a decent defensive infantry squad. The WC551 can also help for like vehicles or infantry fire support, anything. It's actually an redonkulous 15-point transport. Arguably, at least in some situations, better than the KT because of the 2 front armor. It's just nobody really cares because Red Dragons is bad and you only get this with like 4 squads. Tanke Shashou, Lishan 90, Shanxi 85, and Li Ren. And only Li Ren are really great out of these 4 squads. So yeah, you don't really see that very often. Plus, of course, it's a prototype. But honestly, yeah, they're a good squad. Just not very. They struggle, of course, in like close quarter engagements and such. They really are mostly defensive units. You don't want to really push with them. UDT Seal. Yeah, they're better than like Delta Force, but they still only have like a basic MG. They have various transports, but none of them are noteworthy. They're just very boring, average, nothing fancy about them really. So I don't think I really need to talk too long about them. Carbine, of course, is nice to have, but still just basic MG. And the transports, you know, one armor, unarmed, really helicopter. It's a Black Hawk, but you know. US Marine Space, they're just bad. They have a good MG, they have an assault rifle, but for 25 points, having an M72 long and the transports are okay, fine, I guess, a 5-pointer. But I mean, sure, 15-point grenade launcher, but yeah, don't use base US Marines, just don't. Instead, use US Marines 90, 84 mini-me. They're more or less Stoottroepen 95, but for 10 points you get 5 more HP. Definitely not a trade worth if you had, in theory, the choice between the two. You also get generally worse transports. Sure, you get a grenade launcher that the other squads don't have, but they get the autocannon transport, they get a wheel transport, they get a 5-pointer with 3 front armor. Yeah, I mean, they're still fine, but I don't think they're better than B tier, honestly. The squad itself, again, is fine, but coupled with the fact that the transports are also not really noteworthy. Yeah. VDV, they really have only one role, and that is to get them on elite in like Red 4 or use as our airborne, and in a 5-pointer and use them as like grinding infantry, and for that they're fine. I don't underestimate that. But that's really about it. Because in any other situation, you would just use VDB 90. Outside of that, they still, of course, have decent transports, right? But for 20 points, they're not really like a unit that you get to get access to cheap MTVs either. So that's not a role they fill either. And I think they're just C tier. Once again, if you are curious more or want to hear a bit more about the VDVs and such, you're free to watch the Coalition Revisited with Putin 187, 3-hour monster. VDV 90 just do the same but better, right? They have Vampire, which is just incredibly strong, and for 5 points more, that just elevates them so much. The Vampire is just so incredible. It's just so good. The Scratchet, amazing. MTV is great. BMD line is fine, but the Scratchet, BTRD also works so well in conjunction. I guess I should put them in the B tier on. No. Sorry, but I'm just thinking. If VDV90 didn't exist, right? If VDV90 did not exist. Sorry that I'm jumping back to the base ones here, but VDV90 didn't exist. You get them in MTBs, you get them in the Scratch. Honestly, just because the Scratch, I think just because the Scratch is the thing, it'd still be B tier. Call me crazy, but the Scratch is just also so good. And we'll get deeper into the Scratch once I go over the transports in like 5 months or something once I'm there. But yeah, I think VDV90 without a doubt S tier. Even if they didn't have like these amazing transports, it'd be A tier for sure. The Vampire is just too good. Vuurploeg, one of those fist squads, but they have a guided weapon at long range, and it's just again, no amazing transport to speak of. Same with the 95 version. Like, compared to like light riflemen, having only 5 HP and no MG or something means they're also so much worse defensively. It is genuinely a huge difference. They're easier to deal with, they deal a lot less damage, and the other thing is just you can bait like their missiles with your infantry as well, right? So it's just them having AG is in many situations actually a bad thing. So yeah. Vysadkari, they're very similar to Spadochroniarze. They of course don't have a 10-point wheel transport. And that is not to be underestimated. But I think just having access to the MS-17 still makes them C tier. Vysadkari 90, they're basically just like Spadochroniarze 90. So C tier. Wachregiment, that's a fancy one. They're 25 point, 15-man squad with SMGs, which isn't too great. They have the RPG 18, which is just what? And they have an RPK. Maybe you remember what are they called again? Tartinjäkäri. This is the Finnish 50-man squad for 25 points. But their SMG had elite infantry rate of fire. They have the M74A4 law, with a 16 AP, which is a big difference, albeit a bit less accuracy. And the MG is probably worse, but they also have so much better transports. And the Wachregiment is just no role for them, because if you want town grinding infantry, you just spam Mordschützen. Because they're still shock. And they're just also so much more Wachregiment. They're just also so much more versatile. Begun, ignore this 5-point transport, just spam them in this one, and that makes them amazing. Good 5-point transport, just like Natris, just like Reservistes. Just very, very nice. Although again, you don't see them very often simply because Sochong-Su exist, but you know, in armor decks or it's even outside, even in normal decks, sometimes you see them being used in Blue Dragons. Hyundai, one of the worst elite squads, I'd say. Basic MG, basic RPD, basic MG, basic MG, basic primary, and just for an elite squad, one of the worst AT weapons you can have, or you see actually on elite squads, coupled with like very horrible transports. I refuse to talk longer about them than this. I'm sorry. Hyundai 90, they have an AKSU carbine and a Type 69-3, 23 AP, decent range, acceptable accuracy, I suppose. Yeah, most notably they have the BTR ADA, which is the other big difference, and that those two combinations of like being better against infantry and having at least an acceptable AT weapon probably makes them B tier, but the AT weapon is just so inconsistent that it can sometimes be very, very frustrating. But the B tier ADA is just such a nice transport as well. Ubayi, they're basically a copy of Yukvide. Again, I know Putin likes them, some other people might maybe also like them. I think they're not very good. Shanxi base are great actually. Why? They have basic MG, basic assault rifle, RPG 7, which in my opinion is significantly better than in the base law, and they have an amazing 5-pointer. 2 front, 2 side, 70 kmh, 50 cal, amphibious. It's really good. It's not quite K200 with a second MG, but it's fast. It's 50 cal, 2 front, 2 side. Makes makes the actual squad S tier. Now you might call me crazy. Again, maybe I'm a bit overvaluing those strong 5-pointers with line squads. And the other thing that you might say is that, hold on, I thought Red Dragons was horrible, and yes, it is. The thing with those squads that are so good is to get a lot of value out of them, you also need good fire support. And out of all those S-tier cheap 500 spams like Grenadiers, Yakari 90, Riflemen, Rovait, Sochong-Su, Shanxi, Red Dragons, i.e. like Shanxi, i.e. the Red Dragon deck, is the worst deck out of those when it comes to fire support. And when your fire support isn't very good, then your squad, as good as it is, you know, even without a great fire support, it's incredibly useful, but that really, really hampers them. So you could also make the argument that since you need such good fire support, maybe they shouldn't all be S tier anyway, maybe just A tier. And that's valid, but whatever. Shanxi 85. They are the main. If it wasn't for the CC90, they'd be probably even T tier, honestly. They have the Type 691, it has 20 AP, but given their online squads and only 40% accuracy, that thing is going to be inconsistent as F. They also have the WC551, I just remembered, which is nice. And those two are really the saving grace of the squad. If the base ones could come into the transports, you would never see Shanxi 85. Never ever. But the WC551 and ZSC90, bumping up the whole price by another 5 points because the base ones cost 15 and 85 points. 85 ones cost 15, not 10. Is a really, really not a good thing. Really holds them down. And that thing makes him, just that alone makes them B tier now, believe it or not. Yeah. Salusnici. By the way, I can't scroll further, so you don't see them at the top of the list anymore. You know, just like LHV and the other basic 5 and 5 reservists, transport 1 armor, no 50 cal, but yeah. Gilo, we have yet another Igla. It does get better transports than most other Iglas, but I don't think that suddenly elevates them to A tier. As nice as I actually like to use them in the BVP, in the 15-point BVP, it's not a combination like the Igla and Scratcher that suddenly makes them so much stronger. but it's still a nice combination, or just in a 5-pointer. Géniste or Siniste, you can get them in the MS-17, other than an Divider 2, although that's not a strong combination that I would recommend. Yeah, just like the Sapeurs, the Sapeurs. Purple. Alright. That's the infantry tab. Can I see? Yeah. Yeah, we are done with infantry. Just hold up, let me briefly show you. Right, Siniste, last squad, Shilo, Salesnitsi. We have ranked every single infantry squad, just in time, basically, more or less. Once again, this is not 100% final. I probably make like one big video or something where I go over the whole, like all the lists and take a quick look if something, maybe I want to change how I evaluate certain types of units, or you know, like I said, those 10-point line infantry with 5-pointers, maybe I should tear them all down. Maybe I should tear up all the basic 10-point infantry that only gets an average 5-point from D to C at least, you know. So yeah, don't take this as 100% final. And of course, as I said in the very first video, don't take this as a be-all end-all objective list. This is exactly how it is. This is all just based on my opinion, which is a very qualified opinion, without tooting my horn too much here. But this is a very qualified opinion. But it's still an opinion, right? So, yeah. And, you know, that shouldn't make you now go like, I will never use any unit, any infantry squad that is slower than B tier. I mean, you can still have fun by using garbage units, or like not as great units, or just use very niche units, right? I do that also, so you know, please don't, or like, if you have fun with that, don't suddenly stop using the not so great units anymore, just because I say they're garbage. And yeah. Next up, I'll probably go with like anti-air or artillery, something from the support tab. I know people have been saying 2 tanks next, but I think tanks, infantry, and probably planes are, I assume, the most interesting ones, and I don't want to get all of these out of the way right away. So, I'm sorry, in a way. Or maybe I'm not. But yeah, you'll see next week what's going to be up. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll hopefully see you next time.